Good afternoon to all of you. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Okay. So welcome to this event, a joint event with the MEP Stelios and European Network on Independent Living. Welcome to you all. We have some people following us online. And we will start firstly with giving the floor to Stelios to open this session. Stelios, we don't see you yet, but the floor is yours.
I hope to see me. I don't know if...
Yeah.
Okay, and I hope to hear me as well. And thank you all, and especially all the members of ENIL. You know that you're my friends. And among us, we have honorable panelists. Unfortunately, my health is being challenged lately. Therefore, I cannot be physically present to this first very significant event on the occasion of the European Independent Living Day that I host for European Network on Independent Living, ENIL, of which I have been an individual member and a board member for many years. And I'm very glad for that. I really hope that we will have the chance to co-organize many more events in the future where all of us could be present. I welcome you to this discussion on the European Initiative on Independent Living and Inclusion in the Community, an initiative that the European Union is missing, which creates a dangerous gap between the UN Convention on Our Rights, the European Strategy on Our Rights, and the actual implementation on behalf of member states. The two major ingredients of a successful recipe for independent living are unlimited and fair personal assistance and accessible, but also affordable housing. These two provisions should be distinguished and clear among the stakeholders, as well as in the EU guidelines, since there is a deep misunderstanding that traditionally links personal assistance to the housing choice that the disabled person has made, with one setting limits to the other. This connection leads to discrimination against disabled persons or against those persons with a specific impairment, to inadequate access to personal assistance services, or to housing, or even to the creation of brand new forms of institutionalization. On the other hand, the two crucial factors of inclusion in the community are access to inclusive education for disabled children and access to employment, as inclusion should be applied since the beginning of a disabled person's life. When this person is not already excluded, be maintained in adulthood by offering the means to have an income and to remain involved in the community. These four focal points in the EU initiative should be set by disabled persons and the representative organizations. The perspective of industrialization and the more intense support of persons who face the hazard of institutionalization, of the ones who are destitutionalized or the ones who are still institutionalized, should be carefully taken into account in line with the recently released guidelines of UN on destitutionalization. I'm more than certain that ENIL, as the network on independent living, will significantly contribute to the creation of clear, concrete, and in-depth guidelines, making sure that all voices are being heard, no matter of the type of the impairment, the place of residence, and the current living conditions of disabled people across member states. In order for this initiative to be implemented and have a positive effect on disabled persons' lives, the EU has to increase its financial support to set clear and strict terms on which initiatives of the member states will be funded and which ones won't, and to define the monitoring mechanisms of the implementation. As an MEP and as a faithful supporter of the independent living movement, I commit myself to ensure the finest outcome of this EU initiative, working along with my colleague other MEPs, with Commissioner and all of the EU bodies, as well as its own people and all of the stakeholders, on promoting and increased EU funding of it within a fair framework. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward for the upcoming discussion. And Nadia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stelios, and we wish you all a very smooth recovery, that next time you will be with us. So, as ENIL was one of the first network that started already in 1989 in Strasbourg, when the founders of ENIL gathered together by promoting the principles of independent living. It was about self-determination, self-representation, choice and control, and deinstitutionalization. So we are now 34 years later, and we are still now very happy that there is the CRPD that came into force. We have Article 19 who highlight again independent living and being part of the community. We have the General Comment 5 who came into force in 2017, and we have now the DI guidelines of the CRPD Committee on deinstitutionalization, even in emergency. And then we have also the European Disability Rights Strategy, where they at least mention more than 7 times, 7 flagships on independent living. And they are also working now on their own guidelines adapted to the European context. So we are very happy that more and more attention is put on independent living. But we really wanted independent living and being part of the community became reality for all persons with disability, regardless their support need, and that the deinstitutionalization process start to also become a reality. And that the tendency that we see for the moment by building a lot of fancy small group homes or making institutions democratically or inclusive or very modern, that those two systems at the same time will not exist in the near future anymore, and that we will all can use practical guidelines to do step by step closing down all type of institutions and going and giving everybody the support needed to be a member of the community and where he can participate on equal level as all other European citizens. So without going more into the details, I will start with our first speaker, who is Nora Bednarski. She's a member of the Commissioner Dali Cabinet in charge of the rights of persons with disabilities. Nora, I'll let you introduce yourself, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Honorable members, ENIL colleagues, participants, it's really a pleasure to be here today. But my first message is actually that Commissioner Dali had really wanted to be able to be part of this exchange, and she regrets very much that it wasn't possible. Notably, today's event will be discussing the guidelines, which is a very important flagship initiative in this strategy for the Commissioner, and also because today marks the annual celebration of the European Day of Independent Living. So on her behalf, I will share with you Commission's progress on implementing this strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities, in particular in relation to independent living and inclusion in the community. And our starting point is Article 19 of the CRPD. The EU is party to the CRPD along with all member states. And the right to independent living and to be included in the community is at the core of the strategy, which has actually reinforced the focus on the right to independent living and inclusion in society for persons with disabilities. And this focus was reinforced in particular by 2 flagship initiatives that were announced in the strategy. These flagships, which I'll explain and which you're familiar with certainly also, will seek to contribute to a common understanding on what community living entails. And this is a notion that comes through in the proposal, I think, that you will present today, this notion of common understanding. And that is what we will be working towards together. And together is another important notion in this exercise, because these guidelines will be developed together with member states and civil society organizations representing persons with disabilities. And the guidelines and also the second initiative, which is a framework of excellence, will offer guidance to EU member states to support the transition towards community support services which are necessary to support living and inclusion in the community. So the first flagship, the guidelines on independent living and inclusion in the community, will not reinvent the wheel. They will build on the UN guidance that Nadia just mentioned, so General Comment 5, the guidelines on deinstitutionalization, and the underpinning notions in that guidance being control, choice, autonomy, self-determination. And the Commission will explore examples from member states' experience, looking at success stories, but also looking at the obstacles and challenges which have slowed down the transition, and look at how we can identify solutions to address them. The second flagship, which will come out next year, is the Framework of Excellence for Social Services addressed to persons with disabilities. Here, the goal will be to support member states in improving service delivery and enhancing the attractiveness of jobs in the area, for example, through upskilling and reskilling of service providers. And so the two initiatives, the two flagship initiatives, go hand in hand. And our message through both is clear. We need person-centered, local, quality services. They need to be available, affordable, inclusive, and accessible. And this is essential to achieve community-based living. So another word that MEP Kimpouropoulos mentioned was voices. And so right now we're in the process of listening and working with member states and civil society organizations to gather information on the experience of member states and on the experience of persons with disabilities on independent living and inclusion in the community. And in this context, the Disability Platform, which was also a flagship of this strategy, which has now been up and running for about 2 years, is our main channel of communication with member states. And in this forum, they can present their policies and reforms and exchange and learn from each other. And the platform also includes as members civil society organizations, and they also can participate actively and engage accordingly. And so in the platform, we now have a subgroup which is dedicated to the guidelines and to the question of independent living and inclusion in the community. And it had its first meeting last week. And there are other subgroups, but this one has been particularly successful. We have 18 member states who have joined, 9 NGOs, and this really is a testament to the importance of the subject of independent living. So the process, we know the process of deinstitutionalization in EU member states calls for systemic change. And this requires individualized services. It requires transition from residential institutions to community living. And it also requires that general services, education, housing, health, are available and accessible to persons with disabilities. And we know this is a long transformation process that requires investing in the community. And we also know that member states' starting points are not the same. EU funds can and do support very significantly member states' efforts in achieving our common objectives for deinstitutionalization and independent living for persons with disabilities. And in addition, we have EU platforms and fora that also support member states' work. So for example, we have the Community of Practice on Social Inclusion, and the Social Services Help Desk project. These gather information on challenges and solutions when investing EU funds, and when investing EU funds to support the transition from institutional to person-centered, community-based services. And they will identify promising policies and practices that are being tested at the national, regional, and local levels. So that's an update, and we will go into more detail today on work on independent living and inclusion in the community. And if I may, just in a couple of minutes, share with you a little bit about CRPD implementation and also the disability card. So last month, the Commission submitted on behalf of the EU our report to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is part of the ongoing review of the EU's implementation of the convention. And this report, substantial document, very rich, very detailed, responds in detail to the list of issues, 10-page list of issues that the EU received a year ago. And I think we can be really proud of what we have reported on, what we have delivered. We can always do better, but the EU is really leading on CRPD implementation. Next month at the Conference of State Parties, for the first time, Commissioner Dalli will be attending, will speak on behalf of the EU, and will report on our implementation of the CRPD. The other important ongoing topic, which is keeping us busy in the Commission, is the preparation of the legislative initiative on the disability card, which will come out later this year. The card will promote the free movement of persons with disabilities through a mutual recognition of disability status in all member states, so that card holders of the European Disability Card can benefit from the same preferential conditions for certain services as national disability card holders when they travel to another member state for a short-term stay. And our goal is to be ambitious in the scope of the card, and notably to be broader than the pilot project, which limited the services to culture, leisure, sports, and transport. The impact assessment is ongoing, so we will see on the basis of that how the ultimate proposal is shaped. And I wanted to also mention that the public consultation for this initiative is ongoing. Tomorrow is the last day, so you still have a chance to give input. And we've received really an amazing number of contributions. I think over 800, maybe even over 900 at this point. And this is a real reflection of the importance for persons with disabilities of this legislative proposal, and also of the expectation of an ambitious proposal. So to conclude, the Commission is committed to support member states in ensuring equal opportunities and self-determination for persons with disabilities, making sure that all people have choice about where and with whom and how they live is a matter of human dignity and respect of human rights. And the guidelines on independent living and inclusion in the community will be an important building block to achieve that. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to the exchange this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Nora, for sharing with us the initiatives that the Commissioner is going to take, and also for the update on the CRPD reporting. We are looking forward to see the contents, and also the fact that you're going, that you explained the extension, the ambition to extend the areas of the disability card. It will really be very helpful, and if you can guarantee the freedom of movement of persons with disability between the member states, that's something that that ENIL was always lobbying for. So I really hope that will become reality very soon. So without further ado, we go now to see what's happening in reality, how independent living is in some regions of Europe. So our first speaker, Cesar Jimenez, he was also a member of the task force. He will explain a little bit how the situation on independent living and living in the community is in Spain. Cesar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nadia. And I would thank all of you for listening to me and for inviting me to be here today. I heard Miss Lally say one day that disability was a big priority in the European Union. That would translate in the number of MEPs that would be here today, and I don't see too many. They must have something else more important to do. I don't know what. So, in spite of everything that thankfully Miss Nora, I don't remember their last name, sorry, has told us, let me put out doubt all that you have said, and let me say that I hope all the measures you are taking are in the end effective for us and favorable for us, and that would mean that they are favorable and better for all the citizenship, all of European citizens. Then I would like to say that at least in Spain, the person-centered attention has become a motto, and it is used to as a nickname or as another way to call group homes or smaller residential centers for disabled people. And that is really, really sad. Why? Because we have no one to answer for it. And there is a presumption of culpability of the disabled people, the disabled person. Then I would like to say a few statistics of a comparison between personal assistance and institutions without the euphemism that there is in Spain. I will though begin with my region, which is the biggest one, or not the biggest in area, but the most populated in Spain, where there are no less than 26,972 people, disabled people, in institutions. However good they look out from outside, I have been to one, and I come back my life for it. It is not very nice to be in one of them without any hope to go out at any time soon. So let me dictate again what has been said here about persons and third places. On the other hand, besides or next to these 36,972 disabled people, there are only 11 people with personal assistance in Andalusia. That is 11, not 1,100, nor 11,000. No. We are 11 people. 11, period. And that is really sad if you compare it to 6 other communities where there is 0 persons with personal assistance, where there are 0. And besides, on the other hand, you have the top region with over 6,000 people with personal assistance. And so we cannot speak in these terms of one law on the disabled people, but of 17 laws of the disabled people. On the whole of Spain, we have 178,158. I will repeat, 178,158 people in institution center, whereas there are 9,800 or no, 406 people with personal assistance. You have to consider that, or we should consider that 6,000 of those people are living in Guipúzcoa, in the Basque Country, and 200,000 are living in the region of Castilla and Leon. So it is no wonder that there are only 11 of my region. Statistics or these figures speak for themselves, and they point directly to all the authorities, not only regional, not only national, not only local, but what they are saying is not enough is being done for our freedom. And I think that freedom is a fundamental right. I could also speak of the lack of chance of getting a house because of the lack of support and the lack of accessibility or things like that, affordability among them. But they are working on that subject at this moment. So I cannot say much, but what I do say is that I have not heard the word accessibility once in all this process. So it is sad to say, I think that disability or the disabled people will not be taken into account once again. I could also speak about the very low employment rates or the education, which was already judged by the UN and by the role of women, which are at the same time the main workers and disabled people in my country, and of course the little, if at all, communication of the disabled people's rights in my country. But at least we have hope, and we will not give up with our hope, however bad you treat us or all the authorities do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cesar, for sharing with us the regional situation of persons with disabilities. And indeed, we are always asking for more disaggregated data by type of disability, place of living, age, and sex. But it's again, highlighting that only 11% have access to personal assistance is even sometimes shocking. And it's good that we keep on having hope, but we hope that hope will bring big changes. So our next speaker will give us a little bit the situation in Belgium and more on the Flanders region. So I'm happy to give the floor to Katrijn Ruts. She's the policy advisor of GRIP, who's an organization of equal rights of persons with disabilities. Katrijn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nadia. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I'm just behind the screen, but I hope you can see me. I'm happy here to tell you something about Flanders, which is a region in Belgium, the northern region. I think a bit the same as what Cesar Jimenez said about Spain. Also in Belgium, we have these differences between the regions. So I will tell you something about Flanders. GRIP is a human rights organization, just to tell that. We are based here in Brussels, and we strive for equal rights and an inclusive society, which we think is important for everyone. Let's see. Yes, okay. So I think independent living is about the position of people and the participation in society and autonomy, of course. But I think it's important just to see what is the socioeconomic position of people with disabilities. To show that, we made a figure. It's just an example of how you can look at it. The outside line of the circle is the percentage of participation of people without disabilities. And the inner ones, those are different indicators, are the percentages of the people with disabilities. And so the yellow part is actually showing the gap between the participation rates. For example, you can see employment rate is much lower for people with disabilities. Education level is much lower. Income position is a lot weaker for people with disabilities, etc. they depend more than people without disabilities on the private rental market, which is very important to show you something about its position in society. And then I think the other way to look at it is seeing, do we manage to go to a place in the middle of society? Do we reach inclusion? Can we move, are we moving in Belgium or in Flanders from exclusion, segregation, integration into inclusion? And there I think we are not moving enough. I think situation is still, we are sad winner in Europe on segregated schooling. There are still a lot of sheltered employment, a lot of people living in institutions. We made some steps forward lately. So there were important reforms on education, employment, and support. But I think the main point there is that the vision is not about considering phasing out these segregated settings, but it's based on the idea of two systems that exist parallel to each other. In general, we still have to say there are a lot of barriers to participate in society, and enough support is a problem. So I think below that is a mindset that is not helpful to achieve this change to inclusion. The dominant mindset now about participation is, well, okay, normal when possible, but special, there is a special setting when necessary. And I think this works against phasing out segregated environments. It leads to building and investing in strong special environments. So this is a bit counterproductive. I think we should, I hope we can change in the future to a new mindset. Every person is unique and diversity is the only norm. All people have the right to live and participate in society. And that might lead to policy that can change really the structures and the systems to make it possible. It can also lead to reallocation of budgets gradually, maybe, from segregated environment to inclusion. And about awareness, it's important to say that we think people with disabilities often don't know their rights. So there's a lot of work there to do still. Maybe some of you know we are one of the sad examples of European countries that don't have a plan for deinstitutionalization. It's impossible to say it. Yeah. So we are not the only one, but okay, it's a pity and it's a shame we don't have it. It's still a taboo talking about deinstitutionalization. And on one hand, I can understand because there's a lot of fear beneath it. What will happen to persons with disabilities when institutions fade out? Or I can understand it, but that's not a reason to avoid talking about it and really working together and thinking about we can make it true. Preventing going to an institution, preventing people from to go to an institution, we are failing there. I will give you one example. For children, which is really very important, I think, the waiting time for personal assistance budget is a lot higher than the waiting time for a place in an institution. So when families with a child with disability don't manage, they are lacking support and they can't manage. Well, there is the institution as a solution. And this is incredible that it's like this. So we are not preventing even for children. I think we are not curing, let's say, we are not helping people out even out of the institution. And one example is there are still people on a waiting list living in an elderly home, institutionalized there. And this is not regarded as a critical situation where immediate support, immediate personal budget allocation is needed. You know, so there is no awareness, there is no sense of emergency there. I think we made some steps forwards 20 years ago already with the personal assistance budget. This was achieved by a lot of fighting of people with disabilities themselves who worked hard with politicians who saw that it was very necessary. And so for 20 years, there are people who are working with this personal assistance budget. Also for people with intellectual disabilities and children, it's very important. But then in 2017, there was another major important reform. The decree personal following financing made it happen that the financing to the institutions changed into financing to the people, so in individual budgets. This was a very big operation, I think an important one. So those are individual needs tailored budgets. So on the individual needs, there's an assessment. It's not so easy to go through it, but there is a procedure. And also important to say, I think that Flanders is increasing every year the expenditure, so the budgets that go to the people there. There are more budget holders now. You can see this every year. It's increasing. So I think that is it's important to notice that. Nevertheless, I think it's like flying without strong wings. We have these waiting times for individual budgets up to 20 years. This is I don't have words for it. It's a shame. It's a shame. It's incredible. This is like this. Another thing is that the decree, personal following financing, was not being made operational for children. So our next generation there, we should see that still their institutions get a lot of budgeting. Part of the care provided for adults are still financed directly. So for people with lower needs, but still people with disabilities, they often depend on those service providers, and they cannot get a budget and organize support with it. And then at the end, well, there is less government financing per person for cash budget than for voucher. I will show you. So in the system in Belgium, you can choose between a voucher or a cash budget. The voucher is for people who go to service providers, still nursing homes, day centers. They are recognized by the recognition by the government, and they can spend it there. But actually, the voucher is going directly to the institution. When you choose cash budget, you can you have more options. You can also hire personal assistants. But you see there that in Belgium, well, the majority is still in the voucher system. This is changing with the people who are coming into the system. They choose more for cash budgets. This is just to show something about the waiting lists. There are like 16,000 people on a waiting list for a personal budget. This is only the adults. For children, it's like 4,000 or 5,000 extra. So this is really a very big problem. Something about personal assistance. I put a link. I don't know if the PowerPoint will be, if you can get it later on. I can also put it on our website. We made a manifesto on personal assistance, which is a nice document to see what is it, what is the situation in Belgium about it, and what are 13 major action lines for our government to make it stronger. So you all know, I think, in personal assistance, the most important thing is you choose and control who is assisting you, where, when, for which tasks, and how. So the 5 W's, let's say. This has really been a success story in our region. And I think it's important to say, not only for people with disabilities, but also for their families, and I think for whole society. So it's a way to dignity and personal autonomy. It has been clearly a strong tool, a very strong tool for participation. Also, family and partners can participate and contribute in society. They don't need to stay at home for caring and supporting their relatives. And last but not least, it's the creation of meaningful jobs. I think this is also very important that needs to be said. So personal assistance has been a shared interests. I think there is a financial return also because you support active citizenship and you avoid also that people fall out. You get stronger citizens, you get a stronger society, and you activate all human capital we have. And this is necessary today and in the future, I think. Nevertheless, we see in Flanders that the system, personal assistance, is not very loved, let's say, by care providers, also not by trade unions or policymakers. I would say it's sometimes neglected, and the job of personal assistance is also very unknown by the population, which means that there are a lot of people that even don't consider working as a personal assistant. So it's really, really hard nowadays to find an assistant. This is a really big problem. Lower wages for assistants make that people run away to work in institutions where the wages are better. And this is because the cash budgets are lower. So there is a problem. We are not actually supporting enough these choices. So can you then speak of a real choice? That's my question. And also there can be some, the administration is too much, sometimes too difficult, and that is also something that is a barrier for people. So, okay, what should be done? A lot. First of all, make the mind shift, go for full inclusion. We can't hesitate anymore. Inclusion does not mean do it yourself. It's like independent living doesn't mean do it all yourself. No, it's about supporting people. It's also about supported decision-making for people who have more difficulties even. Be careful for new small institutions. I think Nadia also said. Clear communication is very important. And I think we should make action plans, inclusion plans, and engage all domains in close dialogue and deinstitutionalization as part of this plan. So one of the things maybe not only in Flanders, but also in other countries, and very important is stop financing and building new institutions. It's so clear in the general comment. I think it's point number 51. This should be immediately stop. Make working with personal assistance easier, so that it's easier also for people who have more difficulties. Give it immediately your support budget. When you have finished your assessment and there is a recognition of the government that you can have it, you should not be put on a waiting list for 20 years. You should just get it. When we work, we also get our wages. We also get our pensions when we get retired. So introduce direct payments for children. Assistive devices, housing adaptations are so important on the independent living. They just should be reimbursed totally. Now you have to pay from your own income partly, and this is weakening the income. Should not be like this. And I think we should also, you can't change the world from one day to another. There are people now who live in a place managed by a service provider, but I think you can forbid now that they are obliged to buy support there or spend a part of their support budget on support of that service the provider. And then I think almost the last important block is we need in Belgium, we need to start facilitating processes for independent living. The government is not responsible for individual choices people make, but I think the goal is that you facilitate, that people feel supported enough to make their decisions and to run their life, and there we are failing. So it's really important to facilitate the development of support systems and strong organizations led by people with disabilities themselves to inform people about their rights, to support people to live in society, to make the choices they want, to manage their daily support and assistance, carry out an administration, also facilitate that people who have been in institutions for years or are there for years, that they build up social support. Independent living centers, training centers for personal assistants, cooperatives who hire personal assistants, like Uloba in Scandinavia is a very good example. Organizations that offer peer support, peer counseling, etc. All these things are not seen. In the meantime, it's important that we also support care providers to handle the evolutions they are facing. And then on the most important domains, of course, there's a lot to do. Affordable, accessible housing, deal with the high prices. I don't know, in other countries, in Belgium, there's a huge problem. The prices are so high on the private rental markets. Eradicate discrimination in education and also in employment. There should be more support there to make it possible. I'll just go a little bit further, just to on income. We have to move, I think, to individual rights for a decent income. It's not okay. In Belgium, people lose their allowance when they live with someone. And then you become even more dependent on others. You become financially dependent on your partner. And that's not good, and we should change it. We call it the price of love. Also, the disability allowance for disability-related expenses should be given always when necessary. On mobility, yeah, maybe just say, I think you might know it, but the European Social Policy Network made 35 reports very recently, and I put there the link on the report of Belgium where you can read it. It's on social protection. And then mobility, yeah, of course, make public transport accessible, including also the stops, covering hours and places, renewing material, enough staff. So really a good public transport system is extremely important to get to your job, to move around. Last but not least, about money, just some very key very small thing. In Belgium, we hear, yes, there are waiting lists because there is not enough money. So as a human rights organization, we look into the CRPD and what is the committee saying. And well, there is said, use the available resources. So, okay, then you say, what are the available resources? So I think we can shift to spend the money that is already dedicated to disability, that is mainly stuck in segregative structure, into inclusive system. Because if not, if you have two systems, you pay double. And I think we need also to have a debate on looking for extra resources. Financial capital in Belgian society is very high and has increased. So I think in Belgian society there is money, but it's also a question of political priority, maybe. So it's also an enormous cost. You have to see it broadly, I think, this financial question, because there's an enormous cost when you don't invest in the right on independent living. People they can't go to work. Also, the relatives, there's healthcare problems, etc. We should look on that. And well, yes, we think people also can contribute if you invest in independent lives. So the importance of human capital. So thank you for your attention. There is my email address also. If you have any questions or remarks or ideas, I will be happy to receive it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Contrain, for sharing with us the example of Flanders. And the PowerPoint will definitely be shared with all the participants. So now we go to our next speaker, who is Florian Sanders. He's our ENIL policy advisor. And he will a little bit explain the guidelines that ENIL is proposing to the guidelines of the Commission. Florian, the floor is yours.
Nadia, thank you for giving me the floor. The fact that the European Commission is going to publish guidance to member states on independent living is one, I think it's fair to say, one of the most important policy initiatives in the current strategy on the rights of persons with disabilities. Insofar, for us as the European Network on Independent Living, this is a really big day because we have published our proposal to inform this guidance. This proposal, which is now available online, and I think we also brought a couple of copies, is the result of a collaborative process with our members, and thus it is based on the views of disabled people themselves. It's a real bottom-up initiatives. During our consultative processes, it became clear that according to the views of our members, we are still quite far away from independent living being a reality for disabled people. Many participants of our working groups felt that society, the way the society sees disability is still very much informed by the medical model of disability, and many even said they feel that no state party has really the intention of fully implementing the UNCPD. And I think this is more than an image problem because we have a lot of evidence also for the many barriers which disabled people still face preventing full participation in society. When it comes to the institutionalization, for example, we still have no official figures which allow us to precisely say how many disabled people live in institutions in the EU. We have estimates which say that the number of disabled people in institutions has not reduced since the introduction of the UNCPD a decade ago. But of course, it would be good to be more precise there. State parties don't seem to have reliable plans how to implement the institutionalization, since we don't see the adoption of effective deinstitutionalization strategies as required by the UNCPD. Personal assistance is commonly seen as one of the most important disability support services in the independent living movement. There is evidence of some progress when it comes to the spread of personal assistance. The number of countries which have publicly funded PA schemes and the number of PA recipients has increased a little bit, is increasing very slowly. But on the other hand, as we heard in the both previous presentations by Catherine and Cesar, many disabled people, I think not only in Belgium and Spain, who need personal assistance are still excluded from the service. And many services which have been established don't work very well in practice or are not in line with the UNCPD. Many of our members and the participants in our working group to produce our proposal are PA recipients themselves, so they know how it feels to work with the service. Housing prices have increased for everyone, but since disabled people are often excluded from employment or other sources of income, they are especially affected. Many disabled people report difficulties in finding housing which is affordable and accessible, and even with a decent income from work, for example, also here in Brussels, it's often very difficult or not possible to find housing which is wheelchair accessible, for example. So people are forced to continue living with relatives or live in institutions, or actually a big part, there's evidence that a big part of the homeless population actually consists of disabled people who don't have housing next to personal assistance, we need other disability support services if we want to make independent living a reality. For example, peer support or support as caregivers for children, family settings, crisis support. Such services often not available, and mainstream services often not accessible. The disability employment gaps show how disabled people are excluded from work. When in employment, disabled people often face bad working conditions, such as lower wages or increased risk to be laid off. Access to healthcare is a right included in the UNCPD in Article 25, but primary healthcare services often inaccessible, or specialized services are not available in adequate quality, or healthcare facilities or screening equipment is often not accessible. What can we do? Which proposals do we have produced which can make or help make independent living a reality? And what do we hope for the European Commission to include in their guidance? First of all, we feel that state parties finally need to adopt strategies or plans of action on institutionalization, as asked for in General Comment number 5. They should be of high quality, which means that they must include specific timeframes and adequate budgets. It must become clear which of the country's housing or living arrangements constitute an institution, and they must produce changes to the legal system, remove restrictions of legal capacity. In addition, we finally need official figures on the number of disabled people living in institutions. Eurostat and member state statistical authorities should have joint projects to produce such figures, which must exist. Second, to improve access to personal assistance, member states need to give the service a higher prioritization and strengthen the funding available. To enable independent living, personal assistance schemes need to allow disabled people to cover all their needs in practice, which does not always happen, and also be dispersed through direct payments such as personal budgets. Sharing the financial cost of personal assistance out of pocket payments will lead to financial constraints in inequality. Personal budgets and the ability to decide how the money is spent ensure that a disabled person possesses the necessary decision-making power, and it is also clear who the employer is. Member states need to allow equal access to disabled persons of all impairments and support disabled people in residential care settings in applying for personal assistance. Many state parties do not allow this. And also ensure access to adequate information and peer support when applying, ensure choice in deciding who provides the PA service, including the ability to select and hire their assistants. To improve access to housing, we recommend the adoption of comprehensive housing strategies, setting out actionable steps with clear responsibilities, a timeline, and resources allocated. We need initiatives to increase the stock of housing which is accessible, financial incentives to homeowners to adapt their houses could help modify the existing stock of buildings. But we also need stricter enforcement of accessibility standards which already exist when it comes to the building of new houses. Our members tell us that this does not always happen. Fourth, to improve access to community-based services, we need investments into making mainstream services fully accessible and the creation of peer support services, circles of support, in particular for those leaving institutions. We need support for children with disabilities and their families, services that support access of disabled children and young people to mainstream education, employment support such as work assistance and job coaching, provision of legal aid to people in institutions, services to prevent isolation, mental health support, information in accessible formats, more centers for independent living, user cooperatives, and self-advocacy groups. Access to employment can be improved by adopting and enforcing existing legislation prohibiting discrimination on the grounds of disability, which encompasses direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, denial of reasonable accommodation, harassment, and discrimination by association. For this, we need functional complaint procedures and a more active implementation of legislation by member states. When it comes to healthcare, we need increased investments into primary and specialized services to ensure an adequate coverage of well-qualified professionals and facilities who are also familiar with the human rights model of disability. We need comprehensive plans to make facilities and screening equipment and procedures accessible. But all these suggestions will probably not work if some horizontal issues are not addressed. We need to take action to change the way society views disabled people. We can do this by promoting the social and the human rights models of disability, adopting the definition of disability from the UNCPD, and encouraging disabled people to be active in the community. We need more effective disability assessment procedures which focus on ensuring support where support is needed and effective accountability mechanisms. Last but not least, we need an intersectional approach in all matters concerning disability, which reflects the varied lived experiences of disabled people. We need better coordination between the various areas of service provision, and we need more involvement of disabled people in their representative organizations. They should be involved in all developing all the suggestions we have advanced, so that nothing without us is more than just a slogan. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Florian, for sharing it as ENIL's proposal to the Commission's guidelines. And as you mentioned, it will be a big matrix that is needed. It must be intersectional, it must be transversal, and it must really be very pragmatic, that we can achieve the changes very fast. Thank you very much. So our next speaker will bring us through a topic on independent living and a European Parliament resolution towards equal rights for persons with disabilities, recommendations to member states. So our next speaker is Anne-Sophie Pellier, an MEP from the left, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your invitation for this initiative. Yes, I'm a French MEP from the left, and before to be MEP, I was a care worker with people with disability at home. So, sorry for my English because I'm French, so my French are very bad in English. Really sorry. But if you allow me something, just because all speak English here, okay? We are speaking about inclusion. All people speak English. Are you all English? No. So I think if we speak inclusion, we have to be accessible with all language, with sign language, with easy to read and to learn, to understand, sorry. And now we speak about inclusion, accessibility, and it's very difficult for all, I think, to understand English, just English in this meeting. So it's just that we have to begin to be an example if we want to be listen. Yes, so I was medical care from people with disability, young people with trisomy, or people in, I don't know the name in English, but in French it is maison de retraite, EHPAD. And I have based my report about my own experience, what you have said. I have seen all that during my job. Help someone with disability at home, and to have a good accompaniment, a good life. How to say in English, I don't know, but to base your care about what they want, not what because you have to do that. Just to listen to people with disability and base your work about what they need. In my job, it was very difficult because I have no time to do my job. Maybe I have 30 minutes to help someone to eat, to have lunch. How do you do? How do you do? If I had 1 hour, what can I do? And just clean the house. But not to go to look the sun, not to go to have a walk, not to go to learn piano, nothing else. And when you say we need to have good communitary help, yes, we need more and more and more people to help people with disability at home. Even if it's simple, it is institution. In France, it is like that. Institution, institution, institution. You can't stay at home when you are with disability. So I have based this report about my own experience, pragmatic experience, what people need now, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, just now. And to listen what we can do more and more, because we are speaking about, not people with disability. We are just speaking about citizen, just citizen. And if someone is citizen, today in 2023, we are fighting in the European Parliament to say no discrimination, equal rights. We are in 2023. It's just crazy. We are always speaking in all texts. Yes, we need an inclusive society. Yes, but if you have an inclusion society, that means that at a moment you have exclude people. And I just want to say, people with disability as, like me, citizen of European Union. Same rights. Same rights. So my report, I think it is a step to talk about discrimination that persons with disability we know are face off. I'm very, not proud, but I think every fight is useful because the European Parliament has taken a very strong position. 526 vote in favor. It's a very strong position by the European Parliament. Now, what we do? We have a report, what we do? What we do for people for now? I think it is now the Commission who have to do. Sorry, but I think it is the Commission now. I have based my report on the CRPD because it is the first international human rights treaty to be ratified by the European Union and all member states. Additionally, the European Union institutions implement fully the recommendation of United Nations Committee on the Rights of People with Disabilities and ensures that all future legislation fully adheres to the CRPD, I think. We need to take, for example, this convention because the existing European Union legislation on the right of persons with disability lacks effective implementation and enforcement. 16 years after the adoption of CRPD, the daily life of persons with disability remains an obstacle course, from physical and social needs to integration in school or in employment and to all essential aspects of every life. You know, there is a directive which is blocked in the Council until many years. I was not a politician woman before. And I don't understand that this directive against discrimination is always blocked in the Council. Why? Just why? Since I am elected, at every time I can, in every text we have, I ask of this directive and to unblock it. But now, it would be good if it is unblocked, but the needs in 28 is not the same in 2023. So we have to check, to have another view about this directive. All is changing, but we have to do something. Why? We are in European Union, we are speaking about discrimination, and we have a directive with blocked. Wonderful. And after, in each text, we said, we have to do something for people with disability. Yes, of course we have to do. We have to help. We have many texts. Equal rights. Okay. But after, what happens if we don't nothing more? What happens really in the life? It's, for me, unacceptable. Maybe because I was care worker. It is unacceptable that people with disability are always discriminated. And in European Union, it is, if I have the good number, 87 million persons. 87 million persons. We are living 80 million citizens on the side of the road. If all people can sleep correctly, me no. Me no. And you know, my assistant helps me to write a very good text. And I just want to speak about humanity. What is humanity? It is to say the other people, different people maybe, or not, but with the same rights. We have fight about the European Disability Card. We are fighting about that. Because I think that if you are with disability in France, in Belgium you have the same disability. In Germany you have the same disability, isn't it? But you don't have the same rights. You cross the border and it is a miracle. You don't have disability. No. So this card is very important, to have the same right everywhere in European Union. And if you have just a look about discrimination, yesterday, no, not yesterday, before yesterday, I have listened that 52% of people with disability has violence experience. 52%. 1 person sur 2. And if you look about women, it's more and more and more and more and more. Yes. I want to speak about something else. Because if I could remember in my report, 13 member states do that. And I think it's torture. Contrary to the Convention of EU, as for instance, continue to support, no, it is before, I think. No, it is in this paragraph, sorry. Contrary to the Convention, the European Union has, for instance, continued to support investment in a large and small institution. Furthermore, complaints and evidence on practice of torture and other forms of physical and chemical restraints in institutions indicates that it is a systemic issue of European Union. No problem with that? For me, there is a problem. We need an absolutely prohibition and accountability of those involved in such practices. 13 member states do that. We are in 2023. Just to remember. And I have said earlier, my assistant will tell me, you don't read my text very well, and you have been in your road. Yes, I have been in my road, because if we change the view of valid citizens about disability, if we change the view of children with disability at school, if school was very inclusive for children with disability, if we listen, just families would take care about people with disability. If every government give more money to have efficient accompaniment at home, if we stop to give some European money in institutions, if we listen to people with disability, if we leave people with disabilities see what they have to say, if we have people with disability in the parliament, if we want to be inclusive, we have to change all. All. We have to fight against validism. And we have to see people with disability like citizens, not like people with disability. Because at the first, they are citizens like me, like everyone here. I think it's all for me. Just to add something, you know, in the European Parliament, we are fighting to have language sign. There is no language sign in the European Parliament. There is nothing about easy to read and to understand. I have some problem like MEP to understand the European Parliament website. I'm valid. How can do and people with disability to put a petition? Tell me. Why don't we have language sign in the European Parliament? International language sign. Why? And after we say that we have to be inclusive, we have to be an example. We are not an example. But we have to do more and more and more, because now, for now, equal rights are not for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie, for sharing with us all the lacks that still need to be overcome and the extra barriers that we face even within the European Parliament and within the Commission and within the whole Europe. Well, I can only say that let's join forces and hope that we can overcome all these and that we can realize really independent living. I was listening to all of you very patiently, and I completely forgot about the time. And even see a video of one of your colleagues, Katrin Langensiepen, who wanted just to share with us her vision about the guidelines on independent living. If you permit, Katarina, we just pass that, and after that I will give you the floor.
we need help with the tech. Just a moment. Very sorry, the technology is not cooperating with us.
Well, without further ado, we heard a lot today, so I will give now the floor to Katarina Ivankovic. She's the director of, after all this years, I still need to read this, of the European, yeah. I'll let you introduce yourself, Katarina, and give us a comment about what you hear and the initiatives from the Commission itself, and our apologies. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. It's indeed, I'm Katarina Ivankovic-Knežević, Director for Social Rights. But we have Catherine now, so we can, I will wait. Yeah, sure. Good. I think today it's important to be called Catherine because we have Catherine from the member states, from the Commission, and one from the Parliament. So that's maybe also an interesting coincidence. So thanks a lot. It's not easy to grasp all the different views and the different ideas and to say something meaningful and something that would address all of your comments and reflections, but I'll try to do it. Are we trying again?
Just go ahead with your contribution.
Sure. Okay. That's amazing how we all, after 3 years, with technology, every time we experience the same. But I think these situations have increased our resilience level. I don't know if your perception is so, but definitely my resilience level is so much higher. And sometimes you just don't bother, so whatever happens, happens. Okay, so first of all, really huge thanks to ENIL and the Parliament for organizing this discussion. Dear Anne-Sophie, we are very familiar, as you know very well, with your resolution. I think it's really, really an excellent document, an excellent piece of work. And now when I listen to you and your own experience, I understand why it is such a good document, because it really tells the story as it is. So this is definitely something that we appreciate a lot. And of course, it will consist a very good base for the work that Commission is going to undertake towards the end of year. Also, a big thanks for ENIL for writing and putting together, and actually, in a way, I would not be wrong if I say that thank you for easing maybe some of our own questions and debates and concerns, because you really did an excellent guidance. And that's also very much appreciated. And that's also something that will be used as a base for the preparation of the document that we are all expecting towards the end of year. For us, I would share the Florian's thoughts. For us, it is also one of the most important deliverables of the strategy. Well, every deliverable is important, but some of the deliverables will have maybe the greater and the bigger impact on the lives of persons with disabilities, and this is for sure one of those deliverables. Why? Because for many years we have been hearing and we have been reflecting on the different aspects relevant to the independent living, different member states undertaking different actions, some more active, some less active. We have been having the DI discussion for, I would dare to say, for the last 13 years, since the CRPD was really put in place. Even before that, but I would say very shyly. and the tries to DI were much more modest before the CRPD, but then the CRPD changed a lot. In order to address and to prepare the guidelines, some of you know, we have established the subgroup within the disability platform. It's also, I would dare to say, quite evident that the interest of the stakeholders for this subgroup is extremely high. We have 18 member states represented and 9 civil society organizations. In none of the other subgroups, be it on employment package or the disability card or what is the other, accessible EU, we did not have such a high interest. And last week we held the first meeting of this subgroup where the member states and the civil society organizations expressed their views and their understanding what these guidelines should be about. And this will be continuous work because for the independent living, well, for all the other initiatives as well, the dialogue is extremely important, and bottom-up approach and discussing and including the stakeholders is extremely important. And this was visible in the first meeting, definitely. What can I tell you at this stage? When we are also assessing, we are also trying to find out what would be the best way forward. Thanks a lot, Catherine, for mentioning the ESPN report and also for advocating a bit of work of our colleagues. It is a solid base. It is the first such a kind report about social protection of persons with disabilities. After we have published all the country reports, then we found out that a number of countries have changed their legislation or the rules or the benefits or anything in the meantime. But of course, it's a living document, and it is something that we all have to accept as such. Few things I would, before I go into the guidelines, I would like to reflect on what the previous speaker said. I could not agree more with Anne-Sophie about the education and how it plays, I would say, the crucial role. And it's not, when we speak about inclusive education, is something that I believe by now has or become really embraced paradigm and the way that member states react. But I think what we also should consider and find a way how to include it in our guidelines is the education of persons with disabilities about independent living. And that is something that maybe I picked up from all of you today, reflecting on the different comments, and especially from the persons with disabilities themselves. So we'll try to think and find ways how to include it. Then all of you have mentioned at some point services and personal assistance. And in your guidelines, colleagues from ENIL guidance, you have a chapter dedicated to personal assistance. From my own personal experience, being on the other side of the board in a member state dealing with independent living and the difficult topic of personal assistance, and the same arguments I was there to say as Catherine was mentioning about the budgetary constraints, the working conditions of persons who are personal assistants, of not recognizing it as an occupation or all the other challenges that personal assistants face, it is not an easy task. But the fact that it's not an easy task does not mean that we should drop it up. I think the key, one of the keys about independent living really lies in the solid system of the personal assistance. And that is definitely something that the accent is going to be about. And today, many member states are using various sources, either ESF plus, European Social Fund plus, or the national budgets for the personal assistance. What is the truth is that the need and the demand is much higher than what member states have to can offer, and also that there should be the way how to make this profession much more attractive for those who would like to engage. And also, I believe we need to address the ways how the personal assistants are selected. Of course, now you can tell me, but Katarina, you have no competence at the EU level to address this issue. But what we can do, we can really guide and we can really tell the member states which should be the main principles on how to address the personal assistance from the point of view, as I said, occupation and profession, but also from the point of view of persons with disabilities who should have the right to choose who is going to be their personal assistant. And that is something that we will be working very closely with the member states. Also, Catherine was mentioning the redistribution of budgets. It's always the truth. That's the key. And that's the also catch-22, if we can call it, because and it was especially visible, I believe, during the COVID crisis and all the crises that followed the COVID crisis, that many things are possible. I'm not sure that many things which have been possible are sustainable, but that is something definitely that member states have to look really in depth when addressing the independent living. And what we see that moving from the institutional settings to the independent living requires really systemic change of addressing the persons with disabilities in general. And also this requires number of arrangements that needs to be put in place. And our guidance, with our guidance, we will try to address this transitory or transition or transitional arrangements and transitional phase, which also should not be indefinite. And I think we are all frustrated with this indefinite possibilities and no time frame in which we could really say, yes, we commit, we all as EU member states and institutions commit that by certain momentum we will really end all the institutions. But it is extremely important that this transitory phase is managed well and that DI processes with all the elements that need to follow, including support services, including access to services, affordability of services, availability of services, taking into account other needs like transport, like housing, should be put in place, and also taking into account regional disparities, depopulation, and the fact that persons with disabilities live all over the EU. They are not concentrated in certain cities or certain regions. It's all over, which requires indeed all the forces to be really addressed. So I believe I have covered most of my colleagues will also say that I went off the grid with my intervention, but I hope I have covered your comments, ideas, and also provided a bit of insight of where we are. As you know, the guidance is planned for the end of year. We will use all the time to really reflect well with all of you and all the other stakeholders what needs to be done. For this guidance, more than for anything else, we need a strong support from the member states. So those of you who have contact in your, or who have members in different member states, please also advocate that they are involved and they are addressing this issue. And I believe that we should not leave many works for the next commission, but that during this commission and next commission, plenty of the things have been done, but that one day we will be really able to measure by numbers, meaning very low numbers or no numbers of persons who are residing in any institution. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Katarina, for sharing with us the ambition and the leading role that, in fact, that you are playing, despite the fact that it's out of the European competence, but that still the importance is there to make those guidelines reality and also supported by the member states. We will definitely follow these things up and promote them as much as possible. So I hope that now we can pass over to the video. Is there any sound for the moment?
Unfortunately, the European Parliament technology is inaccessible for my laptop. I'm lacking some driver software. We will make this video available online, where it's then fully accessible.
Okay, thank you very much. So this leaves us a very short moment extra. If for those who haven't spoken yet, have any question or remark or comment, it's now the moment. Yes. You can introduce yourself, push on the button, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting conference. My name is Stella Velighi. I have studied physics and informatics. I'm a member of the European Physics Society. And I very agree with the Madame Pelletier concerning the European and national financial aid for the person with disabilities. And I think that must be personalized for every people. And what I mean with that, before you take care or pay for this person, you must speak with this person. You must know what he needs, what for medicament, what for house, what for chair, what for, I don't know, what they need. And after you have this, you must see how is the possibilities to give him what he knows, what he wants, and speak with him the future, what he wants to do in the future. And after that, speak with the Commission and see what the Commission, how much Commission pay, how much Commission, how much the government pay. My opinion is that the people with disability must be helped in their family if it's possible. And for this reason, you must take into account the family of these people. They are much better in the family. And a very important thing is the education that must go in the normal school. And I give you an example. I was to a seminar with autist people, and the seminar was speaking from an autist person. When I come first, I speak with him. I was so surprised when I heard that he was an autist. You see no difference, but he was at home. He was in a school special, and he has a diploma, and he has now his own company. And this is a very important thing. Another thing is about the council. Yeah, Commission and Council is very untransparent institution. It's very clearly, I don't know how the Commission takes the decision. I don't know how the Council takes the decision. I don't know. My question is, can you ask the countries that block this directive that you want to do, why and what they proposed? That is a very important thing, to go further. But if I don't know how they are doing there, the Commission has a lot of lobbyists. They are very influenced there. So it's not the people with disabilities that are speaking, they are the lobbyists. That is my opinion. That is what I think that it's to do very important for these people. And to change the council, you must change the treaty.
Thank you for your question. And you know, in my job, you speak about families. Yes, I agree with you. We have just to speak with families, people with disability, to make another future. Because they have dreams. They want to do something. They want to work. They want to go to school. They want to have a normal life. And I agree with you. We have to speak with them. And in my job, we called that, I don't know if it is a good translation in English, but it was a personal life project.
Yeah. Yes.
But to have that, maybe you will find that I am a little radical. I want to say, for me, when you need to have help at home, I want that it has to be public services, not private services. No profits on the health, on the age, old people, no profits, you know. It is every government, because there is some money about the European Union for people with disability. But how to know if it is good distribute? Yeah. How to know? Maybe the Commission can know if in France, for example, what the European Union has sent for people with disability is a good dispatch for people with disability. Maybe you can. And about the Council, I'm not very, I don't agree every time with Commission. But for this directive, they can't do nothing. Nothing more like me. I think we can do nothing.
Change the treaty?
Oh, yes, I agree. But I hope maybe one day a treaty for people, not for money. But I can do nothing. And for that, the Commission, I don't agree with them always, but for this directive, I'm really sorry, we can do nothing.
Would like to take the floor? Yes, go ahead.
Just very fast, can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, so my name is Camille Roux and I work for COFACE Families Europe, and I was going to stress again the role of family in the transition, but I think the previous speaker and a lot of you today distressed that. So I want to come back on the other point, which is inclusive education, that was mentioned from for a lot of speakers today and also picked up by the Commission, which is very good sign in our opinion. And the point that I wanted to add is actually two. The first one would be on policy coherence, because we've been talking a lot here about one great instrument that we have, which is the disability rights strategy. But when talking about children, there is also another process that is going on in parallel in the Commission, which is, and in the member state, which is the child guarantee. And children with disability are one of the target group under the child guarantee. Yet, when we look at the national action plan that have been published, I'm a bit disappointed to say that there's not, at least to our sense, a lot of action, or at least not enough focus on children with disability. And when it comes to the question of education or inclusive education, we can also find in some member states some, let's say, confusion about what inclusive education means. And what about inclusion into mainstream schools mean? Like, I mean, segregated school or special school are still something that we can find mentioned in some action plans. So it's great to have this process coming under the strategy, but this process needs to be also mainstream. The question of independent living needs to be mainstream in all the documents that the Commission is publishing and also at the member state level. And that brings me to my second point, is about the guidelines are addressed to member states, but who in the government are going to read it? If we just addressed these guidelines to the person that are working on disability, that are in charge of disability, I mean, I'm not sure what will be the impact. I think the point that I want to make is about communication. People don't understand independent living. People are scared of independent living. So we need to find a way so these guidelines can actually reach the people that are not just only working on disability, but the ones that are working on education, the ones that are working on housing policy, on the green transition. So I think as part of the conversation that we have in the working group, in the sub-working group, the question of diffusion and communication, not only to the people that are doing the policy, but also to the general public that also can be quite confused and scared about independent living and don't, because there's a lack of understanding, should be also something, something to add. So communication and outreach, and try to, well, make everyone understand at the political, European, national, and also citizen level what is independent living should be part of those guidelines. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and indeed it's a very important recommendation to spread the outcome document very well, not only to the focal points on disability or the monitoring mechanism who follow up the implementation of the CRPD, but also the main public to realize that paradigm shift and to encourage them to work intersectional and transversal. Okay, thank you very much. One last intervention before we give the floor back to Stelios for the closing remarks. Yes, go ahead, please.
I am Isabelle Flao from the European Council of Autistic People. I wanted just to ask a question about a specific point that I heard Florian mention about the lack of information about the number of people in institutions in different countries, because I had heard also that in France the government would not release numbers. And in the UK, similar things, and apparently also in Belgium. So this is some sort of very concerning issue of human rights. And so is that indeed the case, that those numbers are very hard to get, and can we do something about that? Because it's important for independent living.
Thank you very much. Does any of the speakers want to reflect on this? Yes, so Ines, go ahead.
I would like to reflect, Ines Bullish from ENIL. I think one of the problems with data collection is that there is no common understanding of what is an institution at the member state level. So there is some data, but there are a lot of residential services where you have, 10, 20, up to 50 people living together, which are not considered as institutions in the member states, but they would actually be considered as community-based services. So there are some numbers everywhere, but they will not include all people who we as ENIL, but also according to the general comment or the guidelines from DI would be considered as institutional settings. Then you have also institutions in the health sector, for example, like, for example, in the UK, the assessment and treatment units, or, simply psychiatric hospitals or hospitals, long-term hospitals for children, which are not considered as institutions. They are simply considered as healthcare settings. So, these kinds of settings are, by and large, excluded from the statistics. And then you have settings under the education sector, for example, the boarding schools, special schools where disabled children live, which are also maybe excluded from statistics. So what we are asking for is that all residential care settings, no matter, whether they're for 5 people or for 100 people, but where people live, that they be included in the statistics so that we have a clear picture of how many people are actually institutionalized in the EU.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ines, for clarifying the difficulties, but despite this, we are continue to ask for these discredited data. Is any of the panel speakers want just to share one last sentence before we hand over? Yes, Katarina?
Yes, thanks a lot. I don't want to broaden the discussion or open another discussion, but I just wanted to point that indeed, as rightly pointed out, there is a number of initiatives that addresses and tries to address this issue, such as the child guarantee, where we specifically mention teaching assistance as something that is extremely important that member states put in place, and we know that it's doable. Some of the member states are really using the EU funding in order to address every single child with disability who requires additional assistance to have this personal assistant, or they don't call it, they call it educational assistance. So it is doable, and it is something that could be done. And I also wanted to reflect on, you know, that last year we have adopted the recommendation on the long-term care. And in our long-term care recommendation as a part of the care package, there is an annex which I consider extremely important, maybe even more important than the whole document. And this is the long-term care quality principles. And what it says in this annex is that every care setting, so it doesn't matter of the size or the nature or whatever, has to respect certain quality principles. And the first of those principles says that it's called respect, meaning that dignity and other fundamental rights and freedom of people in need of long-term care, their families and carers. And in the second sentence, I'm going to read it because it's a really important sentence. It says, this includes the equal right for all persons, in particular those with disabilities, to live independently in the community with choices equal to others. And then we say long-term care is provided without discrimination, etc., etc. But it speaks about respect, it speaks about prevention, it speaks about person-centeredness, about comprehensiveness and continuity, and also focus on the outcome. So as long as people need, but it doesn't matter, I don't want to get into a long-term care discussion, then transparency, workforce, and facilities. And this is quite important, and I encourage you to go ahead and take a bit of look into it. What is now the question is indeed the implementation, because as you know, recommendation is not a legally binding instrument, but it is a strong guiding instrument, and the member states have the obligation to prepare their reports on the implementation of the recommendation and the principles in the recommendation. They are now establishing this system of the coordinators or coordinating mechanisms. By now, I think by yesterday, we had 22 member states confirming who is going to represent them. And also, it is quite important when we will be working on the independent living guidelines also to take into account what has been done before and pull it all together, because sometimes we don't need to invent the wheel, but sometimes the wheel maybe needs to move much faster, by much faster pace than maybe what we are used to or have been used to. So thanks a lot. And are we saying like closing words?
It's no. It's no.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. No more discussion, but just really thank you very much for organizing this discussion and opening this important topic to the public. And I'm pretty sure that till the end of year, we will have plenty of opportunities to reflect. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Nora, ask the floor. Shortly,
thanks very much. So I would like to reiterate also Katarina's message. Thank you so much for this opportunity to exchange on the guidelines. And I'd also like to reiterate the point I made at the beginning, which is for Commissioner Dalli, these guidelines on independent living and inclusion in the community are one of the most important deliverables during her mandate. And this was the point also made by Florian in his presentation. And so you can know that great attention will be paid to the topic. We will have exchanges where possible. And thank you also for this excellent proposal that you have tabled today, which we will study carefully. And in the end, it is about systemic change. It's across the board, and it's also about awareness and attitudes to persons with disabilities, about combating ableism, about fighting for human rights of all citizens. And these guidelines will be a really important building block in achieving that. Thank you.
Sophie, you asked for
yes, just to close, because I just remember something. I think that we can't speak about independent life if we don't speak about people who take care, professional people. Often it is women. And if women are not interested now to make this job, it's very difficult to find people who want to make this job. Why? No recognize a bad salary, no time to make his job correctly. They have lost sense of our job. So we can't speak about the important life without speaking to take care too about people like me before who take care about people with disability.
Thank you very much. I will thank also Cesar, all the Catarinas, Anne-Sophie, and all the people who attended over here. Thank you very much for your patience and that you stay over here and your interest, and I hope that we can join forces. So, Stelios, thank you also for being with us until now, despite that you're on your recovery mode. So I hand over to you now to really close the session. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. And even if I was not able to be there with you, I have been listening to all the inputs, and what I have understood is that this event took place because of tomorrow's European Independent Living Day. But I totally understanding that it's not a celebration. It's a day that we need to remind us that we still have many gaps, and we need to fulfill them. So, as we have the cohesion policy for member states, we need to create another cohesion policy for disability. And this policy is our duty to create it and to give the opportunity to member states to implement in their roots. So I think that having this event before this event, I have some concerns, and from your inputs, all the inputs, these concerns have been confirmed. We understand that there are obstacles among European citizens in different member states. We understood that there are limitations of independent living, and that we have still many examples of institutionalization, and there is a confusion on European care strategy. At the same time, you have successfully enlightened all the aspects that the EU bodies have to be mindful of, and you have highlighted all of the lurking risks provoked by unclear guidelines in case they are issued without the actual involvement of disabled people that could end up in misallocating the EU funds and drifting away from implementing the UN Convention and the European Strategy on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Nevertheless, there is a saying stating that when you know your enemies, you consequently know how to defeat them. The misinterpretation of national and international laws of conventions and European strategies is the enemy of implementing independent living and its inclusion. The appropriate clear EU guidelines that will eventually put an end to this permanent misinterpretation is our strongest weapon. And a second weapon is that we need to inform the disabled citizens that they have rights. And we need to create the bottom-up approach in order to create the change that we want. At this point, I would like to thank all of you for your participation in our event. My friends at ENIL, especially Nadia and Florian, for proposing me to host this event and for all our wonderful collaboration. Thank you again. Thank you once again for being in today's event, and I'm delightful to have future initiative concerning disabled people's rights. So let's celebrate for tomorrow's Independent Living Day, and I hope to have future event without this distance that we have today. Thank you once again.
And applause ourselves and everybody. Thank you. Have a lovely evening. And those who want to join us tomorrow, we have a webinar in the afternoon. You're more than welcome to join us online. Thank you for being here again. And have a